Well, hello, Stacey Murphy here with a video on finding the right garden space. I'm going to share 5 keys to success so you can set yourself up for a really great start getting that vegetable garden going. So what you're looking for is 100 square feet to get started. And the first key that you want to look for, 6 to 8 hours of sunlight. Healthy plants really need to photosynthesize in order to mature and grow larger and to turn into food. There is an additional video on an exercise which will help you understand how many hours of sunlight different parts of your site get, and you can go through that exercise and find the right spot for your planting beds. All right, so once people do this exercise, sometimes they also ask the question, can you get too much sun? Well, if you take a look at Alaska in the United States, it receives 18 to 22 hours of sun a day, and as a result, they grow some really giant vegetables. So you can't have too much sunlight, but what you can have is too much sunlight with a lot of heat. So here is the second key. Your temperatures determine which crops you're going to grow, and you want to try not to fight nature. So you want to understand your local temperatures and what's going to work for you. So with vegetable and herb gardens, there is a sweet spot, somewhere between 75 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. There is a spot where all vegetables and all herbs really thrive, and this is a spot that everybody dreams of, and we're talking about daytime temperatures here. That sweet spot also includes 1 inch of rain per week and 8 hours of sunlight. And if you move away from that sweet spot, if you move into an area where it's hot and dry, you get the desert. If you move into a spot where it's hot and wet, then you get the tropics, and so on and so forth. So you're trying to produce a little what's called a microclimate in your yard where you're growing your vegetables, where you get as close to possible as that to that sweet spot so that you can grow your vegetables and they can continue to mature really quickly for you. So what is that sweet spot really look like? So I mentioned that that sweet spot is that, 75 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit is kind of that prime sweet spot. There's a range of temperatures, 55 to 85, and we're talking about maybe nighttime temperatures of 55 and daytime temperatures of 75, 80. That's kind of the sweet spot where everything is going to grow. But then outside of that range, you're going to have to change up what crops you're growing, because otherwise you're going to be fighting nature and things are either going to take way too long to produce, or they're just going to what's called bolt or flower. They're going to move into the reproductive stage and they're not going to give you any vegetables. So at a lower temperature, 33 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and keep in mind when it gets cold, things slow down. So these are not ideal temperatures. While these crops, radishes and leeks and onions and chard and spinach and arugula, all of these crops listed here, they can grow at these lower temperatures. They're going to slow way down. And if it's 33 degrees at night, these crops are going to slow down almost to a standstill. They're going to almost hibernate. So these are not ideal. You really want to try to figure out a way to get your crops back into that ideal range, and I'll give you a couple ways to do that in just a minute. If you are on the other end and you have days that are very hot, above 85 degrees consistently, then between 85 and 95 degrees, you can have pumpkins and tomatoes, okra, peppers, eggplant, cucumbers, amaranth, chard, and then some specialty crops that are going to thrive in those conditions. But if you are going much higher above 95 degrees, then you really want to figure out a way to cool down your crops, and I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. All right, so let's talk about the too cold side. If you want to add 10 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit to your planting beds to try to get it more closely aligned with that ideal range, you want to add lids to your planting beds to make what are called cold frames. These are like little mini greenhouses. The sun comes in, the heat is trapped with that lid. A lot of times people use a hard plastic lid similar to greenhouses. And I would angle that lid towards the sunlight, and it's going to do 2 things. It's going to improve the angle that the sun's going to come in, and it also is going to shed any elements like rain or snow. So angling that top surface really helps. So that's one way that you can increase the temperature. Make sure it's really sturdy, because if you get a lot of snow, a lot of rain, you don't want to have to rebuild it. So make sure that that lid is nice and sturdy with a hard plastic. I've used soft plastic before, and it sometimes rips in the wind. So you can do that. It's a little bit less expensive, but just know that you want it to hold up to the elements. The other way to add warmth is what are called hoop houses, mini hoop houses. These are like mini tunnels, they're also called that. And what you're doing is you're adding little hoops anything that bends, and you can use metal, you can use plastic, anything that bends to create that hoop, and then you can put plastic over the top of that, and that's going to increase the temperature, similar to a little greenhouse. What's cool is the image here on the right. They actually can roll up one side, the south side, so that the sun comes into the south side, and they're protecting the north side, the cold side. They're protecting the heat from escaping, and then at night they'll put that back down. So I would recommend, these are different ways that you can heat up your beds. What do you do if you're too hot and you're getting above 90 degrees Fahrenheit on a regular basis? Then you want to think about cooling down your beds potentially. And the way that you do that is, similarly, you can build a little hoop area, and here you want to use what's called shade cloth, and you can use lots of different colors. There's green, there's white, there's black. All of them work great, but what you're looking for is 40 to 60% opening in that shade cloth so that sunlight still comes through. Now, the one thing to note here is that if you have an area that gets 16 hours of sunlight a day, and you put a 50% shade cloth on it, it's really only getting 8 hours a day, because 50% of the sun is shaded. So you want to make sure that you use this in areas where you're getting a lot of sun and a lot of heat, and you can reduce your area by 10 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit when you're using the shade cloth properly. And then another thing you can do when it gets really hot, and especially if it's really dry, is you can mulch. And here is an image showing 6 inches of straw. And what this does is it adds a layer of insulation for the soil to keep the soil from getting really hot. The sun doesn't beat down on the soil. The moisture stays in the soil too. So this is another way to keep your bed a little bit cooler for your hot conditions. Now, special considerations for high altitude people. These folks have a little bit of everything. So what happens at high altitude, know that there are lots of little tiny microclimates, little pockets of warm and cold. And so I would recommend, and we're going to talk about planting beds in a minute, build a planting bed that's movable so that you can move it from place to place to find the perfect spot for your vegetables. And the special note here is that air is really thin at these high altitudes, and so water evaporates really quickly, and you want to stay on top of watering. So along with this idea of hot and cold is also this idea of dew and frost. So when you have clear skies and cool nights, what happens is dew forms. And this can be great for areas where it's hot during the day, and this provides moisture in the morning. So it's a way to pre-water your garden in the morning, so that's really great. But it can also be a bad thing if you're in an area where it's really cold outside and it turns to frost. So you want to make sure that when you're locating your planting bed, that you avoid the place in your lawn that frosts first. Those can be cold pockets, and so you want to raise your bed up to give it a little bit of heat and put it away from the frost pocket. All right, so the third key is to mark out your growing space and use that as your vegetable growing space, so you're only cultivating a small area. This is a way to conserve resources. And if you're building soil, this is a way to build soil for long-term success. So you're going to mark out your space and use that year to year. And you can use planting beds can be any size that you like, whatever resources are available to build those boxes. Use whatever is available and make them whatever size works for you. This might be determined by how big your site is too, where certain size planting beds work better than others. If you are building planting beds out of wood, use non-treated sturdy lumber. And 2x10s are recommended in the United States. That's a specific lumber size. Keep in mind, when I say non-treated, what I mean is that you don't want pressure-treated wood, because those pieces of wood have arsenic in them and some other chemicals that you don't want near your vegetables. So non-treated sturdy lumber. Those boxes can be placed anywhere. They can even be placed on hard surfaces and filled with soil. I've seen them on concrete. I've seen them on asphalt. It's all good. You're going to build up soil in that location if that's what you have available to you. And notice here that these boxes are coated on the exterior side with something that protects them from all the moisture, but not on the inside. And I would recommend some sort of water-based protection, not oil-based. All right, and then if you don't want to build a box, you can mark off a planting area with stakes and string. So all you need are 4 stakes and some string to mark off the area that you're going to do your vegetable plot in, and that keeps people from walking on it, and it helps you know where the boundaries are. And so that's very useful for people who are going to grow directly in the soil. You can also build movable beds where you can get more sun. Let's say your yard is very sunny and shady and you need to move the bed around to maximize the sun. Movable beds are one way to do that. Or if you have an area that's really, really hot, you might want to move your bed into the shade so that it cools down periodically through the day. So either way, it's a way to navigate the heat of the day. Okay, so the fourth key is that you want to put your plants right in your daily path. This is so important to your success. You want to make the plants a habit. If you don't put your plants right in your daily path, you might not notice that things are happening to them. So this is just a way to force yourself to see the plants. So this is my desk, and basically there is my garden. So it is right out the window. I can see what's going on, and I basically remember to walk outside. I can see if it's dry, I can see if it needs water, and I can see if something strange is happening. I can see if some cat is coming into my garden, whatever the case may be. And I also have a secondary line of sight. My outdoor kitchen table is to the left there of this image, so here is the view from that table. So I have lines of sight to my garden from pretty much everywhere. All right, so the fifth key is that vegetable and herbs need water, and the water is what moves nutrients through the plants. So this particular key, what you're going to want to do is check your climate data for how many inches of rain that you receive during the part of the season where you're going to be growing. So I go to climate data. I think it's usclimatedata.com, and I grabbed this graph for New York City, and what you notice is that New York almost gets 4 inches of rain every month, which means about an inch a week, which is what we're looking for. Now, you're not necessarily going to get all that rain at the right time, but what I know about New York is that I don't have to water my crops in the spring and in the fall because I get enough rain from the sky. But during the summer, when it gets hotter, I do have to water. And why is that? So we have a whole video about watering and how to know when to water. But what I want you to think about is when you think about your climate, do you get enough rainfall? So 1 inch of water per week is great for gardens when it's about 60 degrees Fahrenheit, but it starts to get more water resources are needed at higher temperatures. So 1.5 inches of water per week for when it gets to about 75 degrees, and then 2 inches of water a week when it's 80 degrees and hotter. So you'll want to check your local rainfall and then decide how much additional water you're going to need. You may decide down the road, this might be too much for now, but you may decide down the road that you want to think about getting a water barrel, a rainwater harvest system to collect rainwater. And these numbers are what's going to help you understand how to size that rainwater barrel. All right, so there's your checklist. So in order to find 100 square feet of the right growing space to grow vegetables and herbs, 6 to 8 hours of sunlight or more, you want 55 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit, or you're going to appropriately change which crops you're growing based on the temperature. You're going to have a dedicated space to grow those vegetables. You're going to put that dedicated space in your daily line of sight so that it becomes a habit, and you are going to get your crops 1 to 2 inches of water each week. All right, that's it for this video. I'll see you on the next one.